Hi, welcome to Subaru and New Signature. Just a couple of things before we get started. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded and we will email out that recording after the webinar. Usually takes a few days and I apologize for the delay, but it takes us a little bit of time to process the recording. We'll take questions at the end of the webinar. But if you have questions as I go along, just throw them in the chat box, and a moderator will make sure that I see them and attend to them before we wrap up. I'm Jamie Fraser, and I'll be presenting this webinar today. I'm a solution architect with New Signature and focus on advanced analytics and custom applications with a particular focus on mobile applications. Before taking on my current role, I ran the mobile practice, helping to build capability and establishing our architecture and design practices. If you aren't already familiar with us, New Signature is a full-service technology company and a premier Microsoft solution provider. The values that we were founded on continue to drive our success and our commitment to delivering great customer experiences. And we think good customer experiences are one of the things that help to differentiate us in the marketplace. And I'm contractually obliged to point this out. Fun fact, we're the only partner to ever win Microsoft Partner of the Year award in 2 consecutive years. And I'm told that this is slightly inaccurate. Thanks to recent partnership, we now have 3 Microsoft Partner of the Year awards. So we work very hard to live up to that distinction. From a technology perspective, we deliver a full life cycle of services across the entire Microsoft stack. So it doesn't really matter if you're on-prem or in the cloud or a combination. We want to help you understand how you can get more value out of your deployments, get more benefits, and mitigate some risk along the way while you're doing those implementations. Another fun fact, we hold more than 18 competencies across the entire Microsoft stack. So just to put that in context, if you're looking for a gold certified partner, we pop up in most of the workloads that you'd be looking for help on. So again, we think that this really helps to differentiate us in the marketplace, and we think that it brings a lot of value to our customers. When I don't know how to do something, I know that I've got access to a bunch of other really well qualified consultants that can help me to solve problems quickly. Okay, so enough of the sales pitch. We're just going to quickly review the agenda. So here's my snazzy section titles, The World We Live In, where we'll just review the state of really IT in general, but with a particular focus on mobile and the impacts of mobile internet access. The setup is where we'll talk about the conversations that we had with Subaru leading up to the design of Dealer Connect. We'll have a quick demo of the solution itself so you can get a sense of what we did and the value that it brings. And then we'll talk a little bit about our mobile practice and then wrap up and take any questions that you have. So the world we live in. So I think we can agree we're all in the same boat. The technology world is not the same world that we were in, that we lived in when we got started in the industry. So when I think about myself, my first big boy job was with Microsoft, and we were just about to release Windows for Workgroups 3.11. I know that's hard to believe based on the young face that you saw at the beginning of this presentation, but I've been around for a while. So just to put that in context, being able to connect to a work network and share files and printers easily was a modern miracle. That was something that was fantastic. Almost nobody was online, particularly outside of work. No version of Pokemon ever existed and hadn't even been thought of, to the best of my knowledge. We had cell phones, but they were gigantic, and I'm sure, like the rest of you, I rode a T-Rex to work. Or maybe one of those things isn't true. So really, it wasn't until 1995, so quite a bit later, that people really started to get online. So obviously, the world was getting online prior to this period, but this is really where we started to see consumer penetration of internet access. Um, and around the time that Windows 95 was released, Bill Gates released what's now a very famous memo, where he said that he was worried that someday soon a device that was a lot cheaper than a PC would allow people to get online and access the web. So if you think about that in the context of today, the much cheaper bit is probably a bit debatable, but you can certainly see that the the workhorse PC that ran everybody's lives has now just become a functional appliance, and in many cases isn't even something that's required. So if we look at those numbers, in 95, about 25 million people were online. So again, putting things in context, that's a bit less than the current population of Canada. So not a huge number, but not a bad number either, whole country. 5 years later, almost 500 million people. So that's a lot more Canadas in a very short period. When we look at those people, though, almost all of them were still really chained to their desktops. So we didn't have ubiquitous mobile internet access um, in any shape, really. I think it was possible to get online via a mobile connection in 2000, but it would have been very expensive and not available to many people. So if we zip forward to 2014, so again, very short period where we had about 500 million people in 2000. Now we have almost 3 billion people online. And what happens as a result of that is that as employers, we assume that employees have access to the internet, and they can likely access some or all of the resources that they could access at the office from their homes or other places where they may be. And so the employees' relationships with those businesses have changed as a result. So again, turning to myself as an example, I think I'm a pretty good example of this. Technically, I'm based out of the Toronto office. I work with sales and delivery professionals across Canada, the US, and the UK. And right now, I physically work in Cape Breton. So it doesn't matter where I am in the world, I'm at the office. One interesting effect of that is that I get a lot less face time with my colleagues, and I've had to develop new strategies to ensure people want to reach out to me. So I'm in the business of people wanting to work with me, both internally and externally. So as I develop those new strategies, the business itself also adapts itself to me and my new work style using technology. So where before, for me to have a face-to-face interaction with somebody or for me to develop a personal relationship with that person, it would be much simpler for me to work with them in person. Now I'm able to reach out to them and really have a very personal connection with them via Skype, particularly via video. Okay, so let's look back at our graph again. There's a new color. So now we've got orange, very exciting. So of those 3 billion people that we were talking about, almost 2 billion of them were accessing the internet via a mobile phone. And that's a huge change when you think about it, right? So where before people were chained to their desktops and only able to access the online world when they were tethered, now they're able to access the online world from wherever they are. And again, that has huge implications for the way people work and the way people enjoy their free time as well. The thing that this graph doesn't show us, we don't have a lot of insight into based on the data that we have, is how many of those people that are carrying mobile devices and accessing the internet are carrying more than one mobile device. So one that their employer provides and their own personal device. I think my gut says that that's trending down from the previous 14-year period. So I think that as businesses procure devices for their employees, and as the consumer grade devices become more and more enterprise friendly, businesses are starting to provision devices that people would want to use in all aspects of their lives. So the people that would remain from that group would be the people that really feel strongly about separating their personal and their work lives. Okay, one more flash forward. So let's look at 2020. So these are projections. Obviously, we're not in 2020 yet, but the projection is that 4 billion people on Earth are going to be able to access the internet, and they're going to do so at least some of the time using a mobile device. So that's amazing. Now there's complete parity across the number of people that are online and the number of people that get online via their mobile device. It's impossible to distinguish it at that point. So that's a little more than half the population of the Earth able to connect to the internet from wherever they are, which is amazing. So between 1995 and 2020, there's a huge, vast gulf in a very short period of time. So think about how tapping into that pervasive access can change your relationship with your employees and your customers and your stakeholders. So here's a quick example. We're not going to talk about it today, but we'd be happy to talk to you about this particular example one-on-one. So BoardWorks is an application that we developed many years ago, and today thousands of board members around the world use BoardWorks to review minutes and other documents. They participate in online voting, sign PDFs, send them for approval. They basically do everything that they need to do to get ready for a board meeting and to execute their day-to-day duties as board members using this application. The nice thing about the application is they can work online in the airport or wherever they are. Or if they happen to be flying or otherwise disconnected, they can just keep working using BoardWorks, and everything's kept in sync with the back end when they come back online. They don't have to do anything special. The application just takes care of that for them. So that's great. Just as important, though, if their device is lost or stolen, they don't need to worry about that either. We encrypt all the data that we store on the device, and we encrypt it beyond the level that the device does. So there's one more layer of security between those highly confidential board documents and somebody that happens to swipe a mobile device like an iPad. They're easily lost, but easily managed as well. And if that's not enough, from a security perspective, we can also remotely wipe the device using remote management tools. So that means that once we've discovered that the device is lost or stolen, even if somebody has started to try to compromise the encryption, by the time they succeed, none of the data will be left anyway. We've wiped it out remotely. So that started life as an online-only SharePoint portal, and I will be honest, absolutely nobody would use it. We had some success selling it to enterprise customers, but when it got into the board members' hands, they just refused to use it, and it brought very little value. And so it evolved into being, at first, an iOS-only application implemented on iPad, and now has evolved again into a cross-platform application that supports all of the operations that the original iPad application supported across all of the platforms. So now you can have the same great experience on an iPad, Android tablet, or a Windows tablet. So we have full feature parity, and the applications are always maintained with full feature parity. So when one platform gets a new feature, they all get the new feature. And we'll talk about how that happens in just a second. So when you're thinking about how to implement enterprise mobile, one of the things that you need to think about is what device and operating system you're going to target first. Um, so you generally don't want to go to market across all the platforms without having tested an idea first. You want to get some exposure to the ideas and to the design languages. You just want to see if there's some business value in it. So how do you choose what you're going to do first? Well, it's as it turns out, it helps to think about the actual form factor that you want to target first. So think about who your audience is going to be. Think about whether this is a consumer facing application, something where you want to engage with your customers or other stakeholders that are external to your company. Is this going to be an internal application that people will be running? And then you also need to think about what sorts of actions you want people to take with that application. So one thing to think about when you're thinking about that is what the form factor is going to be. Is it going to be a phone-based application or a tablet-based application? So it seems like this should be obvious, right? Everybody knows that when we develop mobile applications, we should go with iOS first. That's the way to get market share right away. But as it turns out, Google happens to make a very popular smartphone operating system. So when we really look at the numbers, Android represents well over half of the smartphone market in North America, and in some markets it approaches 85 to 90%. Google just rules the world of smartphones with Android. And the way it does that is a few different ways. Because Android is available across a spectrum of manufacturers, it's also available across a spectrum of price points. Carriers like it because it doesn't make the same demands that Apple has made traditionally of carriers, and carriers are also able to manage the upgrade process more closely with Android than they are with iOS. So there's a whole lot of reasons that Android gets out into the market and has such a dominant share. But the fact is that it does have a dominant share. But it's still hard to debate that iOS has most of the mind share when it comes to smartphones. So Android's gaining the mind share slowly, and quality manufacturers like Samsung are definitely helping. But Apple still dominates our minds. So even though the market doesn't reflect this, the mind share values are very different. So you need to think about whether that has an impact on what platform you target first as well. Just for the record, though, there's still a lot of money to be made from a 45% share of a pie that's 4 billion smartphones in diameter. You won't be making a mistake by targeting iOS first. BlackBerry OS doesn't even exist anymore, so I should probably update my slides someday soon. I kind of hate PowerPoint, and Windows still hasn't made much of a dent in the market, but it is still swinging in this fight. And so, again, you need to think about who your actual users are going to be. There's definitely scenarios where targeting Windows 10 for phones first would make a lot of sense, but a good starting assumption should generally be that you'll serve the people or serve the market that has the greatest penetration, particularly in business to consumer scenarios. If we look at tablet, though, it's totally different. So you would think, oh yeah, that settles that. Always lead with Android. But in fact, iOS dominates the tablet market. So it seems kind of crazy, right? iPads dominate by a big margin. Even if you put the two leaders in Android together, they still can't beat iPad in terms of their overall market share. There is a twist here, though. So I'm not showing you all of the data. I'm only showing you the top three. And in the source data that the chart is drawn from, the category other accounts for about 42.6% of the market share. So that's a huge number. We can't say for sure what other is in this study, but my gut says a good portion of it is low-end Android tablets. And my gut also says that Windows tablets are also definitely in the mix, and that's a growing category. So even though this is fairly recent data, it's going to fluctuate a little bit, and we're really not seeing the whole picture. Again, you kind of need to do your research to figure out who your users are going to be, to sort out what your device mix is. I always enjoy trick questions. So my trick question is a tablet really a mobile device? So if you think about it, sure, you can lug it around, and for the most part, the operating system looks a lot like what's running on your phone, for the most part. So, yep, it's a mobile device if you're being a pedant. But the graph shows a slightly different story. So if we think about how people actually use their devices rather than how the device presents itself, as it turns out, if you think of a mobile device as being a device that people use while they're outside the home, for instance, now we're thinking about consumers. So this is a device that you pick up and you carry with you and you use during the day. So somewhere between 9 and 5, let's say, while you're probably not at home if you're a typical person. So what we see is that leading up to the workday, there's quite a bit of um, commonality between the way people use their devices. But when we head out into the world, and people get started with their workday, desktop totally dominates where Google sees its searches from, followed by mobile devices with tablets at the bottom. And what that tablets at the bottom tells us is that people aren't taking their tablets out into the world as frequently as they are their phones. So if we think about a mobile device as something that you carry in your hand and you consult sort of all day, every day, then probably the phone is really the true mobile device, where a tablet is more a companion device. So it's something that you keep close to your TV or on your couch, or you keep it in your bag and you use your tablet for very specific tasks, just like you do with your PC. And we see in terms of advertising, where data rules, advertisers are starting to pick up on this as well, and they're creating specific experiences for tablets and desktops that are very different from the experiences they create for phone. One last thing, again, the data doesn't really tell us where how Surface devices are accounted for in this graph, but I'm pretty sure they're showing up as desktop devices. The thing I love about Surfaces is that they've really created that convertiblet form factor. They finally realized the vision of Windows tablet PC edition from a million years ago, where we have a device that can act equally well as a desktop / laptop kind of computer, as well as a tablet. And Apple and Google seem to agree, since they're coming out with their own combination form factors that are competing in that space. So I think that's a space to watch, and definitely a space where you can really innovate. Okay, so we promised we were going to talk about Subaru's Dealer Connect app during this webinar, so I think I have to make good or you'll be cranky with me. So let's start by looking at the architectural challenge. So if we look at the enterprise mobile space, we see a lot of room for innovation in problem spaces that look something like this diagram. SharePoint is pervasive across the enterprise. Dynamics CRM is getting a strong foothold, and we can imagine other CRM solutions in this mix. And a mobile application is, of course, only useful if it can connect to the world. So Azure is a great place to host services that your app needs, although, again, you can imagine other cloud providers as well. I will say that Azure has some compelling advantages for enterprise mobile solutions, so it is definitely a place that you should be looking to be hosting your mobile services. So this diagram really reflects our philosophy that your next portal won't be a portal at all, or it won't only be a portal. Instead, we envision enterprises extending the value of their portal solutions by making high-value workloads mobile and offline capable. So think about your SharePoint portal today and think about where you have a web part that executes some function. Anywhere where you've got that kind of scenario where you have a web part, some small widget that's sitting on your portal today that's highly used by your employees may represent a great entry point for an enterprise mobile app. If you can envision how that widget could also be useful while an employee is away from their desk, and especially while an employee is temporarily offline. And so that's really what Dealer Connect's all about. We want to take a great SharePoint portal. We don't want to mess with that portal too much. We want to take advantage of the features that it offers us and the functionality that's been implemented there. And then we want to extend all of that functionality to anywhere that a sales professional is speaking with a customer, and then make that interaction even better by taking advantage of the capabilities of the device. So we want to make the selling experience more friction-free for both the seller and the buyer. So from a business perspective, here's the challenge. So Subaru Canada has about a little more than 80 dealerships across Canada with a 400-person sales force in those dealerships. So it's fairly large and distributed group of users. Like most auto manufacturers, they've invested pretty heavily in high quality marketing collateral that people can use while they're engaging with customers, as well as send home with them. So, obviously you want to be able to give people takeaways where they can think more about their large ticket purchase. But some of those assets are also some of those assets are things that Subaru doesn't want distributed outside the dealership if they can avoid it. So we have this mix of takeaways and in dealership assets that we want to manage. So from a technical perspective, everything lives in an on-premise SharePoint instance in Subaru's data center, and that's locked up behind a whole bunch of firewalls. You can imagine, like everybody else, they are very security conscious. So in order to get access to that SharePoint portal, you have to jump through a lot of hoops before you can eventually drill into the corporate domain. And that's sort of the core business challenge when you think about it. So from there, the user can log into SharePoint. Things go pretty smoothly once they, are actually connected. But if you think about that from a salesperson's perspective, there's a couple of challenges. The big one is you probably don't want to try and lure a customer into your office so they can view a brochure or a video. And you don't want to do that for a couple of reasons. One is that you're going to have to fiddle around with your connectivity for hopefully just a few minutes, but it could be a really long time depending on how bad a day it is. So, people are going to lose interest while you fiddle around with that. And frankly, it's no fun for the salesperson. And really, customers resist that anyway. If you think about when you go car shopping, going into the office means talking about undercoatings and cooling your heels while the salesperson negotiates with their manager. So really, by the time you get into the office, the sale's being closed, right? So you're going to resist. As a salesperson, then you want to be able to easily access those assets that go with the cars that the customer seems interested in, but you don't want to break the flow of the conversation by now trying to get them into the office and trying to get through all that other stuff. So it would be better if while you're showing them the view under the hood in real life, they could also watch a snazzy video explaining all the cool stuff that goes into a Boxer engine, for instance. Or if they're looking at the interior of the car that you're showing them and they're really not able to see themselves in that car because it's, say, a black interior and they really, really want the ice blue, then you can give them immediately full screen glamour shots of the same model with that color. And I'm sure I used the wrong color name Although I worked on this application like crazy for a long time, I don't actually remember their naming schemes for their colors. So apologies to Subaru. Um, so all of this is now facilitated by SharePoint, but without any of the hassle of connecting to the corporate domain. We can access all those assets that SharePoint manages for us, but we don't have to actually make a regular connection. And imagine now that you're not even in the dealership anymore. So you've got the customer out for a test drive and stop and go traffic. You can still review those assets with them while you're out on the road without having to worry about connectivity. And I'm hoping that the cars in park are at least stopped before you start showing them the videos of the fancy stunt drivers in action. So technically, one of the big challenges we saw in the previous slide, get the user authenticated without making them jump through a whole bunch of hoops, but still be able to get them talking to the corporate domain. So I can't talk about the specifics of how we did that in this particular case. Obviously, we don't want to advertise everything about the security architecture of this application. But if you speak to your account manager, they can set up a meeting and we can review what the options are today. I can say that since we shipped this project, which is quite a while ago now, the story of how to accomplish this has become a lot simpler and a lot less expensive. So it's a space that's evolving really quickly. It's very exciting, and I'd love to talk about the options with you one-on-one. There's lots of different ways that we can skin that cat. And they're all pretty cool, except for the cat, of course. Okay, so the official marketing call to action has now concluded. Please speak with your account manager. On to the content. So one of the great things about being authenticated as a domain user is that now we can also honor all of the access policies and group memberships. And that's super easy because we now have the user, like the real user context. We're logged in as them. And so SharePoint just does all of that work for us rather than us having to do a bunch of security trimming on the application side. So as long as you can get that user's identity passed through to SharePoint, it does all the heavy lifting. And that's thanks to all sorts of great technologies that Microsoft's developed over the years, but it all kind of boils down to Active Directory. I have to say it's as much fun to say that this is really easy as it was a million years ago when I started selling Active Directory with Microsoft. We also wrote a custom content synchronization engine that makes sure that the devices always have the freshest content. Again, there's some new ways that we could approach this challenge today, but when we were implementing this, we did have to write a custom engine from scratch. And getting that to work on low memory devices is a separate presentation all by itself. That's a whole lot of work and a whole lot of thinking. And you can think about other scenarios where you would be similarly challenged with very large assets or very large responses that you need to manage in low memory scenarios. So again, that's something that we'd be happy to talk to you about. And then the last thing that we need to worry about is making sure that terminated users don't retain the content. So this is intended to be used on people's personal devices as well as corporate supplied devices. And so we can't have somebody that's terminated wandering off with their iPad and then still having access to this application as well as having access to the content. So we managed that a couple of different ways. One was to write custom business logic that automatically erases the content when a terminated user tries to log in. So there's a special response from the login in the login process that tells us that we should do that. But we also rely on Intune to remove corporate-owned data and apps when an employee is terminated. So again, this is one of those cases where we kind of double down on how we secure the application and its content so that we have greater assurance that what we want to happen, which is the content to disappear, actually does happen. So here's our success criteria. Most importantly, we knew that this had to be a native experience, and that was crucial to the success of the project. We didn't want an application that looked and felt like it was a business application. We wanted something that looked like a consumer application that was just installed from the App Store. And it just so happened that it did something useful in the enterprise. And that's important for a couple of different reasons. One is that this is something that a salesperson is sharing with their customer. And so the customer needs to feel like this is a seamless experience that the salesperson wants to have. But it's also potentially going on that salesperson's personal device. So they already have a connection to that device and the operating system. And we want to make sure that we honor their choices so that, again, they love using the application and they want to use it. It makes a better experience for them, and that translates into a better customer experience for their customers. So along with that, we also wanted to make sure that the experience for everybody was the same, regardless of whether they were connected or not. So I'm sure we all know about Murphy's Law, and Murphy's Law and network-dependent applications are really made for each other. If you are relying on a network connection, Murphy will get you in the end. So we really couldn't afford to let them meet. This had to be a very seamless experience. Users don't really like complicated login procedures, and you can only keep an actual customer's attention for a short period. So we had to make sure that minimal time to productivity was maintained, and so we did that by cutting down on the login procedure as much as we could, and then making sure that the user stayed logged in between sessions. So both of those things were very important. And no offense to any sales professionals on the call. I happen to be a sales professional as well, but not the group that is inclined to do what you ask them to do all the time. And so we had to keep things simple so that they would stay engaged and use the application. And if you think about it, sales really always needs to be moving forward. So the ultimate goal of this application was to reduce and remove barriers to moving a sale to the next stage. Anywhere that we could make things simpler for a salesperson to do their job and to engage with their customer, we wanted to do that. From a marketing perspective, though, it would be nice to know what assets are actually used the most by salespeople, and also be able to correlate that data to closed sales, so that marketing can implement some continuous improvement, right? So we want to make sure that people get the assets that are effective. We want to create new assets that are more effective. So we want to be able to collect telemetry that tells us stuff about the assets that we have out in the field. So one of the challenges that Subaru gave us was to be able to gather as much data as possible about how users were interacting with assets. So we're pretty happy with that. As an example, we can capture the page numbers in a PDF that were actually viewed. So if you have a multi-page PDF, I can tell you what pages are actually viewed. And I can also tell you how long each page was viewed by that user. So that gives me pretty strong signals about what parts of a brochure, for instance, are actually being reviewed with customers and what parts are just being flipped past on the way to the pages that the user actually wants to discuss. Okay, so let's look at what our options were. We knew that we didn't want to write 3 different versions of the same application in 3 different languages. And one of the reasons for that is, I'll be honest, you may have detected or not, I don't really have that kind of attention span myself to do the same thing that many times in a row. And regardless of my attention span, it's also a pretty expensive proposition for the customer. So having to sit down and write a Windows version in C# and then an iOS version in Objective-C or now Swift, and then another version for Android and Java is just a lot of work. And, we bill by the hour, so that would have been way too much for the customer. And we also thought that maintaining quality across the applications would be very difficult in that scenario. So we ruled that out. We did talk to Subaru about it, but it didn't take long. It wasn't a very long conversation, to be honest with you. So that really left us with either creating a responsive experience over the SharePoint portal. So in that case, we're just creating a new portal, but we're making sure it's a responsive website so that it's mobile capable. Creating a hybrid application, which is sort of the same as the responsive website scenario, except that in that case, we're creating HTML5 pages along with JavaScript and CSS, and then packaging those up into a wrapper application that's native. So we still have a web experience, but it looks like a native application to the App Store. Or using Xamarin's tools to create actual native applications written in C Sharp. And so the table is meant to show you the success criteria across the top and then which ones we could fulfill using each option. And so we use that as the basis for our conversation with Subaru so that they could decide how they wanted us to build the app. For the record, we landed on C Sharp. Okay, so now we're going to give a demo. Sorry, pushed the wrong button. Normally, I would have a colleague of mine to do this demo with, but he is not available today. So you get the Jamie-only version. So I apologize for my acting skills ahead of time. So the scenario is that I'm a seller at a Subaru dealership, and my customer is interested in the Audi A3, but their friend has suggested that they check out Subaru as well to see what Subaru is all about. And so, again, as the seller, if I was presented with a competitive situation for the A3, then one of the cars that I would think about would be the WRX STI. And I just realized I pulled this onto the wrong screen, so I apologize for that. Let's try that again. Okay, so here's our application. Sorry about that. So if I'm presented with a customer that thinks they want an A3, then the WRX STI, as it turns out, is a pretty good choice. And so I would engage with that customer and start by either selecting from one of the categories down here, so videos or interior photos, or I can see all of the assets for that particular model by tapping the model name itself. So this is an experience that's slightly different on Windows than it is on iOS. The functionality is the same, but we're able to present these sort of grouped views more efficiently on Windows, thanks to some of the great features of Windows controls. So I would probably start off by, asking what it was about the A3 that really appealed to them, and I think a lot of people would find that the A3 or would agree that the A3 is a beautiful car aesthetically. So I might start off with reviewing some exterior shots and making sure that they had a good sense of what the WRX STI looked like on the road and standing still. I might also take them through some interior shots. Again, you can see these are beautifully rendered, and they're rendered for the particular device. And so when we sync the assets, we find out what the device's resolution capabilities are, and then we provide them with the best asset that we can from the SharePoint library. We're able to easily change the kind of assets that we're reviewing, and if we happen to be in the more specific view, then we can refilter however we want. I will show you a quick video demo, but this is likely not going to play well. Wow. So I'll just go back. It's the mud splashing that I'm told is the real seller in that video, so we got that far. Um, So yeah, as I move along, I'm able to review all these different assets with the customer and make sure that they really understand the value proposition, including things like competitor comparisons. And one of the reasons I wanted to show the competitor comparisons, so if I were doing my fake sale, I'd point out that, oh, I can give you comparably or actually better, more features in the Subaru than in the Audi for about 5,000 less in the standard package. So I would definitely point that out in my fake sale. But I would also point out to you that, sorry, just having a little tapping difficulty here. I'd also point out to you that, for instance, with this asset, I'm not allowed to share it. So you'll see that this is flagged as this asset is not shareable. So this is one of those things that we're able to manage through SharePoint directly. So we're able to use metadata that SharePoint provides us to add extra business functionality other than just telling us how to render this data. So that's really critical for this customer to be able to lock those assets down like that. So once I'd moved the sale along, I'm obviously such a great salesperson that my customer is going to buy. I would also show the CRM integration. So the reason I like the CRM integration, and just so it's clear, this functionality is actually a web application that's integrated into my native application. And so even though I've built myself a native app using C# and I have a great native experience, that doesn't block me from those hybrid experiences that we talked about before. So if I want to leverage something that's already been built, or if I want to create a hybrid experience within my application, there's nothing stopping me from doing that. And Xamarin has some great tooling to help me build out hybrid applications as well as pure native applications. So I just wanted to quickly show that as well. I'm not going to demonstrate all the functionality of the CRM integration because that's a separate web application, but it's good to know that we're not limited to purely native applications. And that's our demo. Okay, so let's talk about how we did that. And that's really this enablement, right? The being able to write native apps using C# is kind of magical, right? When you think about it. So how does all that work? So Xamarin's value proposition is that it does enable C# and .NET developers to leverage existing skills. So if you think about your own workforce, probably you have at least a moderately strong C# based workforce. It's a very popular language. And it lets those developers converge on more than one platform. So even if you have developers that do know Objective-C or Swift, they may not be as capable developers in Java. So being able to harmonize on one language is definitely an important benefit. So Xamarin itself doesn't seem to have been around for a very long time, but it's really derived from the Mono project, and the Mono project's been around for a really long time. So Xamarin is one of those overnight sensations that took, 10 or 12 years to emerge. So Mono's kind of the same idea, right? So where Xamarin uses C# to target iOS and Android, Mono uses C# to target Linux. And now that Xamarin and Mono are part of the .NET Foundation, Xamarin's been acquired by Microsoft, there's a big push to kind of harmonize all of these different implementations of the .NET framework, meaning that as things go forward, it's going to become even simpler to develop multi-platform applications in C#. So that's great news. So if we just look at this slide, in really general terms, Xamarin really provides these API bindings between C Sharp and the .NET Framework and the native platform APIs. So it's basically like a translation layer. So an API binding, here's kind of a very lame visualization, but you can think of an API binding as being a translator, like I said, and it's a faithful translator. So it's as literal as it can possibly be. It's like word for word kind of translation. So if we think about that in terms of translating languages that humans use, over here we have simplified Chinese, over here we have Russian. But those have different syntactic rules than English does, I beg your pardon. So even though I can figure out what it means when I do this sort of word for word translation, technically it's not really correct according to the rules of English, right? I have to do some work to sort out what's going on. So that kind of sucks, right? If every platform has different rules to follow, different syntactic rules or different APIs, then how is it possible to share code between different platforms? And the answer is there's a little bit of magic involved. So it's still possible, but we have to add in a little bit of extra architecture in order to be able to really derive the full value of the Xamarin Stack. And like I said, there's magic, of course, and that's why we're here. Okay, so if we add a framework to Xamarin, so let's say MVVM cross, for instance, but MVVM cross is just one possibility out of many. What we're really looking for is a way to differentiate between platform-specific and not platform-specific problems. So when you're thinking about the cross-platform problem, the stuff you really have to worry about is what's actually particular to the platforms themselves. So generally working with the device hardware is a good example of that. All phones are going to have a GPS radio, and so they can provide some way to tell you where you are in the world. They all have a different way of asking that question, right? So that where am I example that we just looked at. So the first step that you should take is to factor out all the stuff that's not platform specific. So it's really the business logic that's particular to your business problem, and stuff that into a library that doesn't care what platform it's running on, because the business problem doesn't care what problem it's running on. And so if you're in .NET land, those are called portable class libraries, and they're pretty neat. There's a bit of hand waving that you need to do to get them up and running, but it's a lot simpler than it used to be. So if you have bad experiences from a couple of years ago, revisit it. It's not as bad. But that's kind of where we're going to put all of our business logic, and that's going to be the stuff that we share across our platforms. And then, like I said, in our case, we're using an open source framework called MVVM Cross as the basis of our applications. And what it does is it lets us factor out our non-platform specific stuff, and then gives us a way to kind of sort out how to implement the platform specific stuff in a way that the portable class library can cope with it. Which takes away even more of the complexity of dealing with cross-platform stuff. And we could have done all this ourselves, but it makes sense to use a framework that's already developed. It's less risky, it's more cost-effective, it's tested by more people. And this one's open source, and so we can tweak aspects of it to suit our own needs. So if something doesn't really work the way we think it should work, then that's okay. We can just crack open the source code and sort it out. A couple of other benefits to think about. One is that if you are using a framework that's commercially available or publicly available, then it's going to be easier to find developers that already understand what you're doing. So as you're hiring, it makes stuff simpler, makes the interviewing process simpler. And it's also nice to have a framework that kind of has opinions that agree, that align with your own opinions. So in my case, I like MVVM Cross because there is a good alignment between its opinions and my opinions. Your opinions will vary, right? So we're not saying that MVVM Cross is the only way to do this. We think that MVVM in general is a great way to do this, but there's lots of different ways to skin a cat. So if we look at the diagram, the stuff in orange is the stuff that you can think of as cross-platform, and that's the core. You definitely don't want any platform-specific stuff in there, and the framework should prevent you from doing that, making that mistake. The navy boxes are stuff that are platform specific, so things that are platform specific. Um, and those platform specific implementations correspond to the platform abstractions. So the abstractions are the way um, that we're kind of harmonize across the platforms, and then this is stuff that we need to write or we need to acquire. So I really don't have enough time to get into this in deep detail during this call. This is meant to be an overview, but if you speak with your account manager, they can set up a one-on-one call, and I can talk about this stuff forever. So I promise I will take it as deep as you want, and try not to make it too nerdy, but I definitely look forward to talking to you in more depth about this stuff. It's pretty powerful, and it really has uh, implications across your whole application platform portfolio. So it's not just for mobile applications. Okay, so those platform abstractions, just so we're clear, um, these give us a way to translate the platform specific request into a correctly formatted request. So since the translation happens both ways, it means that you're guaranteed that whether you're writing code in your cross-platform library or in your platform specific application, all the parties understand each other correctly. So going back to my lame example, the platform abstraction kind of acts like the translators at the UN, right? Each one hears the input um, language that's appropriate for what they're doing, and then they provide the translation that's direct uh, or correct, sorry, for the language that they're translating to. So now we get where am I rather than I am where I, for instance. Okay, so one last piece of the puzzle is to think about the actual user interface. So way over here, I've just highlighted this in red. These are the views that you would create for each platform. So it's nice that we can share all of this code, and it's great that we're able to get all this reusability. Sometimes, though, it's nice to be able to reuse the user experience as well. So normally, or traditionally, we haven't been able to reuse the user experience when we write native applications. We have to write the user experience for each platform. And so that's that's still something that you'll want to do if the application really does need to be super customized for every platform. So I can think of lots of examples um, where you'll definitely want to have a fully native user experience on each platform. But there are also times when we just want to go ahead and have a similar user experience, or we don't want to worry about the other crazy details of those platforms. So if you, again, take another step back and kind of take a look at this problem, each one of these platforms has its own way of managing memory. It has its own way of managing application lifecycle, like what happens when the application is suspended or terminated or starts up. There's complexity in there that you really need to understand. And so if we want to take away that complexity, um, and still get the benefit of this cross-platform approach, how are we going to do that? And again, there's hope. There's that picture again. So it is possible to do that, and it's possible to write your user experience once and have it run natively on all of the target platforms, and also manage the intricacies of things like memory management and lifecycle. Okay, so since we're trying not to panic, we're going to take away the red box on the left. And then we're going to look at Xamarin Forms. So Xamarin Forms takes kind of a similar approach to working with the platform's specific APIs for user experience and application lifetime management, as MVVM Cross takes to working with the specifics of working with the device's hardware and its operating system capabilities. So same kind of concepts, right? We want to have an abstraction. And in this case, the abstraction is going to be a XAML variant, but those get translated when we build the application and into native views. So the XAML emits the right kind of control for the right kind of platform. So that makes sure that there's no performance penalty for using XAML. And it means that the resulting code is 100% native. So you get all of the same benefit of writing a native application. And Forms also gives you a container that understands the specifics of the platform's lifecycle and memory management, so there's no need now to learn that stuff either. So it's a great entry point for developers as well, if you want to know the truth. So if you were writing an application that was okay to be very consistent across platforms, then really Forms is a great choice for you. If you want to take control over things, you still can within Forms, so you can make a very platform-specific rendering for particular control or for a particular scenario. But the more renderers you create, the less benefit that you're deriving from using Forms. Magic. Shazam. So here's an example of an application that we wrote, again, for Subaru using Xamarin Forms. So on the left-hand side is our screenshots of the iOS experience. On the right-hand side are screenshots of the Android experience. You can see that they're extremely similar. This was all achieved with practically no renderers at all. And really cut down on the amount of time that it took to implement this application by a lot. So we still follow the same architectural guidance that we talked about before, where we have our business logic separated into a portable class library. But now we've implemented our UI in a separate portable class library, in a separate project that then emits these native experiences on these two platforms. And just for the record, we're pretty sure we could emit this immediately on Windows Phone as well, but we actually haven't tried. So we haven't tested it. That's why there's no screenshots of it, but that's all fully supported on Xamarin Forms. Okay, that was nerdy. I get it. Sorry. Let's just take a quick break and talk about our mobile practice that we built up here at New Signature. So overall, we've got over 30,000 hours of mobile experience connecting to enterprise data. Here's some examples of applications that we've built. So we talked about Dealer Connect today in some depth. I mentioned BoardWorks in passing. GreenShield on the Go is a fully native application that's customer facing, same as the My Subaru application we just saw a screenshot of. And one of the things that we're very proud of with that application is that we released that to all 3 stores on 4 platforms, all on the same day, with feature parity across all of those platforms. And this is something that we continue to maintain and add features to today. And I didn't really talk about it, but Storyteller is an application that we built really as an internal selling tool, was how we started it. Now it's something that's available for purchase as well by our customers. Same sort of idea as Dealer Connect, but with a less customized experience. Although if you want to use Storyteller to get started on something like Dealer Connect for your own business, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. Either using it out of the box, which is a fairly low cost proposition, or customizing it to meet your own needs. From a service offering perspective, I think it's just important to note our three pillars of offerings. So we offer professional services, which is really what I talked about today. But we also have managed services and cloud applications as well. So cloud applications, Storyteller falls into that category. And we're also releasing applications to run on SharePoint and Dynamics CRM. And we'd be happy to talk to you about those things. Managed services lets us extend our skill into day-to-day operations. And so if we build a solution for you, our feeling is that we should be able to operate it for you or manage it for you if you don't want to take on the IT burden. And that's really what managed services is all about, is making sure that you're able to move more quickly with your IT strategy without having to worry about staffing. And that's it. So we're going to move into questions and answers now. And for folks that are going to drop off the call, thank you very much for attending. And don't forget to talk to your account manager about enterprise mobile solutions. Thank you very much.